Aloha. Today we're going to be looking at our precious Hawaii shorelines. We enjoy our shorelines for surfing, swimming, snorkeling, hanging out at the beach with Ohana and friends. And unfortunately, we've been having this ongoing problem of erosion. And part of that can be attributed to sea level rise, climate change, but a huge other part of it is what is a proper way to manage a local shoreline. And so today we're going to be looking at a shoreline that's not managed and the effects that that's having on the shoreline and the Aina side, but also Makai. And then also look at shorelines that are being managed properly and the effects that a properly managed shoreline will have. There's a medley of native plants that we feel like can solve erosion as an ongoing problem and switch it from a reactive solution where we're trying to do seawalls and sandbags and fill, which will never work, versus taking things back to what nature intended and using the tides to build up sand dunes and our precious beaches. So it affects the public. So even if you don't live on the water, Kamehameha Highway on many places like in Ka'ava is literally feet away from the shoreline. So you have the shoreline, you have where the wave impacts, then you have the Kamehameha Highway, and then private property. So either we're going to manage the shoreline and keep that existing highway, or we have to completely relocate the highway, and that could either infringe in private property or push setbacks back or have an enormous cost. I mean, creating a new highway even 10 feet away may not even make sense, because if we're not going to manage the core issue of the problem, then it doesn't make sense to try and move the problem just a few feet away. Also for shoreline owners, people who have kuleana for their particular part of the shoreline, they're probably asking themselves, how can I, one, do my part so I can preserve my own shoreline use, but two, what is my kuleana to the public and to everyone else and to the ocean to manage my part of the shoreline properly. And we also have to create those solutions to be easily accessible and part of normal shoreline ike and management. All right, welcome to the greenhouse. This is where a lot of the action happens. One of the most important things is to have consistency, to be able to have the shoreline plants that you'll need in the future. So propagating on a daily basis is very, very important. We have these trays. This is the first step of propagation. So we'll put some soil in here. We'll collect a bunch of seeds. This one is naupaka. So you can see these naupaka seeds here and the little sprouts. This is a weed, so we're going to take that out. You want to just come and manage this well. So all of these other ones are little naupakas that are sprouting. And when they get to a certain size, you can put them in the liners. So from the tray, you go up to these liners. So these are little baby naupakas that came from the trays. Now they're in these little liners. And as they start to root and get a little bigger and solid, we up pot them one more time. So these are the naupakas. Once they get a little thicker, we can put them in the ground. So that's the steps, going from a seed to the tray, to the liner, to the pot. And you can also up pot this one more time, just depending on how strong the plant's looking. There's other plants like a kuli. So we do this one from a cutting instead of a seed. The kuli is super important for rocky shoreline. So you can tell it's a succulent plant. And we're gonna go look at areas on the shoreline where we've planted a kuli and it's thriving and taking over the areas that used to have invasive weeds and other species that we don't want. So if you want to manage a shoreline properly, one, you take out everything invasive. Two, you have to have the plants ready to replace them. Otherwise, the weeds just going to come back. Then this is another one, Pauohiaka. It's a ground cover vine. Beautiful. And we'll go see this on the rocky shoreline also. It does well in sandy or rocky. But you can see we went from liner to bigger pots. And these are even flowering. And you can see how beautiful this little vine's going to be. All right. Now, these are all the trays. So on a daily basis, we keep on clearing, propagating, planting. So these are trays of naupaka, milo, pauohiaka, akulikuli, and even the big trees start with humble beginnings. So these are all milos. You can tell a milo by the heart shape among one of the characteristics, but look at this. This is like 1,500 milos. Each of them could be a very majestic shoreline tree. Milos do very well along the shoreline. So you can see how one tree, one tray can produce an incredible amount of trees. And it was just a matter of collecting seeds, putting them in, watering them. Super easy, doable for everybody to contribute in a major way. This is one Milo forest just in itself. So we're gonna up pot these pretty soon into the liners, let them grow a little bit, put them in the trays, and then I'll show you what a large Milo that's ready to plant looks like. Come on over. So this is our section of tea leaves. We have a variety. We have green tea leaves, Kauai tea leaves, Lilinoe, and tea leaves are good for many different purposes. We like to plant them for cultural, food use, leis, spiritual, religious practices. So you can never have enough tea. So these are all in little pots and they're ready to go. So anytime you want to come and volunteer, we always have nice plants for you to put in the ground. This is Kualiava. It's another vine. Crawls on the ground. Very aggressive and strong. Kualiava has a purple flower. These need a little resurrection, but they're so resilient and they can really choke out the weeds. So if you manage Kualiava well, it's a great ground cover. You know what, I don't know what this one is. It's a new arrival to the greenhouse, but welcome. Now these are my favorite trees. These are kamani trees. So the kamanis are like the sequoia of the Hawaii shoreline. These can grow to be 100 feet. And when I saw the majestic grandpa Mama Pacha kamani in a secret location, I was so inspired to reforest with kamani because each of these can be so amazingly big and provide shade, place to gather, and cultural practices like for canoes, carving, hale. The kamani is a tree that we should definitely reforest along the shoreline area. Here we have our big tree section. So we have milos coming up from the liner trays, up potting, all the way to these bigger sizes. So these are the size that we get it to from the liner up to this. And you can see how this tree, being about however tall I am, is gonna have a good chance to thrive and survive. So it was worth the 8 months or so that it took to go from the tray to this size, because now we can count on this to survive and on the shoreline. So this is a kamani, and you can tell a kamani by looking at the leaves. You can see how close the lines are together on the leaf, and that's one sign to tell a true kamani, which is this one, from a false kamani. And also the seed. The kamani of a true kamani is round, and the other one's more like an almond. So that's how you can spot a kamani. This is another majestic shoreline tree, kou, not koa, but kou, K-O-U. And I can tell by its big, beautiful leaves. This will also grow to be 50, 60 feet. It's a big shoreline tree. So the milo, kamani, niu, kou, these are all shoreline trees that can thrive on a coastline, and they provide great shade. And it's nice to see that these are starting to be planted in a lot of places, public spaces. So that's great. These are all milos. So all of these milos are the size that are ready to go in the ground. These are the naupacas. So we had that tray, the liners. Now all these naupacas, we put them in these size pots, and they have a good size to grow. So pretty soon these will be ready to go in. It doesn't feel ready quite yet. But this is the exciting phase also, when it's right about ready to go in the ground. And when we go look at the shoreline, you can see the effect of just one naupaka and how large it can get, but also becoming a source for future propagation. So as you plant more, you get more seeds, you're able to propagate more, and the whole cycle just turns faster. These are ulu trees. So these are also of the size that are ready to go in the ground. We like to put these a little bit back, not right on the shoreline. It's for the wind and the salt. But the ulu can do really well in these low-lying areas. So these will produce a solid, consistent food source for generations to come. And the ulu is another shoreline plant that we like to incorporate in the medley. Now we've got all these beautiful different types of tea leaves here. So when you mix these big trees and the tea leaves and the ground cover and the bushes, it becomes this beautiful landscape that I think is really the mix of proper shoreline management and aesthetics. And so if we can make all of these plants more available, I think people will definitely start to choose them. I have a big farmland that needs to be managed properly. It's agriculture land, and I was choosing what kind of crop would best fit this aina, and native shoreline plants completely make sense because it's one of the few agriculture zoned properties that are along the water. It's the proper culture to propagate naturally. It's not too wet like up in the mountain. And I could see the shoreline along my aina eroding at a very rapid pace just from looking at historic shorelines that took place over the past decades. So I'm looking at it going, wow, if this continues, the whole shoreline, not just my aina, but all the way down, will have an issue. So as I learned these solutions, it just made such natural sense to go really hard on it and become the source of places that people can come and learn and propagate and get these shoreline plants. These are willy willies. So this is another tree that does really well on the shoreline. And we like to mix them up, have a medley of different trees. So willy willies, they have this thorny branch, but beautiful tree and important to plant and propagate all kinds of trees along the shoreline. I love this plant. This is called an akia, A-K-I-A, and it's a shrub. But you can see how it has a very cool looking leaf structure and vine, And we'll go see it in action on the shoreline, but when it grows out, it's just got this beautiful spread, traditional plant, and does very, very well along the shoreline. So this is our section of hakea, and they're all at the size that they're gonna go in the ground. All right, this is this yellow flower. This is Ilima papa. So this is another one that's really good on the shoreline. And you can see they're doing really well in the liners. And then these ones are up in the bigger pots. But you can kind of see how these will fill in the shoreline with the other ground covers. Bees will come, butterflies. It's a good native plant to plant alongside all the other naupaka and these other vines all work together. So this one with the big leaf is a shoreline vine called Pohuehue. And you can tell it has these nice big leaf shapes. Looks like an apple or however you envision it. But this one will crawl from under the ground and have a nice vine system, and then these will pop up. So it's coming from under and pop up. And you'll notice that the other vine, the Pohinahina, which we'll look at next, comes from over and crawls. So you got an over vine and an under vine, which is pretty clever, Mother Nature. And then this one, this maple leaf looking plant is ma'o, Hawaiian cotton. So the ma'o thrives along the shoreline. It likes the dry, sandy type of ecosystem, not right on the shoreline, but just a step back. And we'll go take a look at these on the shoreline, and we'll pick some cotton at the same time. All right, the Pohinahina. This is a really amazing vine. You can see it's just this little skinny thing that's sprouting, and they're all kind of at this stage. So maybe one more week and we can put them in the ground, but their root system's looking really good. And so this vine will crawl over the top and just establish new territory and keep sprouting out from every little branch. And it is a critical part of the ecosystem of a shoreline, working really, really well, especially with the naupaka. And you can tell a Pohinahina by these purple berries and flowers. So that's one of the indication of a Pohinahina, along with a vine system sprouting out. All right, thanks for coming to the greenhouse. We're gonna go look at an unrestored shoreline to see what it looks like with decades of no management, no native shoreline plants, and then we'll go off to the restored shoreline after. Okay, and then so this is the start of the shoreline that's not restored, and so we could get all of this, and then we'll go over the bridge and get all of that. So this is a shoreline that unfortunately has not been managed over however many decades. And you can see the type of species that are here that are thriving now is Guinea grass, California grass, you got castor bean, this yellow flower. The bees like it, but it's not a good plant. And so you don't really have anything here that will help to hold the soil or anything here that's a native plant. And so that's going to affect, not on this particular part of the Kayaka Bay shoreline, it's rocky. So it's not going to have the same erosion effect in a sandy area, but it will affect the quality of the bay, the quality of the river and the ocean. So even in rocky shoreline areas, it's important to also malama those areas because they have a direct effect on the ahupua'a and the ocean and the general shoreline. Okay, welcome to Kayaka Bay on the sandy shoreline part of the bay. And as you can see, this is not a restored shoreline, and it has the usual suspects of the guinea grass, the yellow flower, the castor bean, and all this other stuff. And you can see how every plant will seed and propagate itself. So either we're going to let this guy propagate and win, or we're going to replace it with something else that's going to hold the shoreline and be indigenous to this coastline. But this this weed is as tall as me, and this seed is just spreading everywhere. So it's really something that you have to start from scratch and just be very diligent about it. So as you clear, you got to plant and then come back through and weed, and just in a very short period of time, you can reverse this horrendous looking shoreline into a beautifully restored shoreline that completely does not erode and actually starts to accrete, which is the hot word of the day, accretion, which is the opposite of erosion. And it is possible. We can make our beaches bigger. We can restore lands that have been eroded, because the tides either are going to take the sand away or build up sand dunes. But if you have the proper mix of plants, the sand dune has things to just continually build on. So when there's a big tide, you actually have a chance to bring in sand. So climate change and sea level rise are definitely big issues, but by protecting the shoreline, you'll be able to far outpace the sea level rise, because the shoreline can protect itself. And even if there's a increase in sea level, if your shoreline is solid, you're going to be able to catch more sand and have more dunes. So it's one of the things that's really within our control on a local level, and that will actually have the biggest impact. The global issues are important, but the actual on the ground of how we manage each particular shoreline is the most important thing. It's the beautiful Kayaka Bay and the sandy coastline all the way up to Mount Ka'ala. Such an epic shoreline. But currently, it just hasn't been managed. So a lot of rubbish around, stuff that washes up, or things that have been here for years. Unfortunately, it was used as a landfill for decades. And so now we're on the Makai side of the shoreline, and we can see the mix of plants here is all junk. You got the same suspects, the guinea grass, the yellow flower, the castor bean. This is a kiave, so we don't mind that. Some milos are doing well. These are some baby milos doing well. So we kind of are looking, we kilo and get a sense of what would do well here. So the milos are thriving, right? We definitely need the aki grass as the front line. We'll put our mix of naupaka and pohinahinas and vines, and then we'll remove organically, no pesticides. So this shoreline in 12 months can completely reverse its condition, similar to what we've done on the other side of the restored shoreline. And as we go down here, we're going to show you areas that we've started to plant, and then you can follow us along on this journey of restoring the entire Kayaka Bay sandy shoreline area. Okay, welcome to Kayaka Bay on the sandy shoreline part of the bay. And as you can see, this is not a restored shoreline, and it has the usual suspects of the guinea grass, the yellow flower, the castor bean, and all this other stuff. And you can see how every plant will seed and propagate itself. So either we're going to let this guy propagate and win, or we're going to replace it with something else that's going to hold the shoreline and be indigenous to this coastline. But this this weed is as tall as me, and this seed is just spreading everywhere. So it's really something that you have to start from scratch and just be very diligent about it. So as you clear, you got to plant and then come back through and weed, and just in a very short period of time, you can reverse this horrendous looking shoreline into a beautifully restored shoreline that completely does not erode and actually starts to accrete, which is the hot word of the day, accretion, which is the opposite of erosion. And it is possible. We can make our beaches bigger. We can restore lands that have been eroded because the tides either are going to take the sand away or build up sand dunes. But if you have the proper mix of plants, the sand dune has things to just continually build on. So when there's a big tide, you actually have a chance to bring in sand. All right, this is the first step of restoration of Kayaka Bay on the sandy shoreline side. We came from the area that was completely not touched yet. We didn't clear anything out over there, just wild weeds. In this area, we cleared it. We planted naupaka, we planted aki-aki, and it's a good example of this kind of intermediate time when either the native plants are gonna win or the weeds are gonna win. They're battling for space. But the shoreline's best friend is aki-aki. So this aki-aki grass is always the first one to go in the ground. It's closest to the shoreline. It loves pure salt water, so it doesn't even need fresh water to thrive. And the aki-aki will actually crawl towards the ocean and provide the first layer of root system before the other plants, the naupaka and pohinahina and the whole other medley. So the aki-aki is the one that can handle the most concentration of salt water. And that's why we always put that first along with a sock to prevent any of this brown dirt from going into the ocean. So if it's just the weed system, the dirt goes into the ocean, the bay comes brown, and then it throws off the whole balance of the kai ecosystem. So we do the sock, aki-aki, aki-aki will catch this, and then the other plants will start to take over space. So at this point, it's really important to come in and start to take out weeds like this. You just gotta come in and one by one, pull them out, see? And either this root system's gonna win or the aki-aki or naupaka. So it's always important to plant areas and have a plan to be able to manage it. So as you're planting, you can help the good stuff start to establish itself and eradicate the junk stuff and plant right behind it. Okay, you can see we planted 4,000 naupaka along this shoreline, and they're doing really, really well. So this is a naupaka who has a weed neighbor. So we're gonna just take this out. Look at that. So the weed was thriving, but now this has no competition. And you can see that these little nodes are starting to grow on the bottom. So that's a very good sign, is it's gonna start to sprout out, get the ground going. So if we plant a little ground cover around it, that would be a nice next plant. And these naupakas are looking really good. Right here, here. We space them every few feet. And you can see that around almost every naupaka, there's something that wants to compete with it. Like this big nasty guy is taking up so much space. So if we came in and weeded just all of these out and then let the next rainfall happen, the naupaka will start to win and thrive. And if you do that 5 or 6 times, it'll give the time necessary for the naupaka to win. And those are the steps for the shoreline, is just commit to an organic way of restoration and management. Let's go look at the other side where we did weed it, and we'll see how our naupaka is. So this area is where we started the restoration of the Kayaka Bay sandy shoreline. And you can see that these naupaka, we've been weeding it and giving it space to flourish. And look how big and wide the leaves are starting to spread now. So this is a very good sign. There's still like these kind of weed, you know, this big thorny one. But it's starting to claim a lot of the space now. Like 50% of this Aina is now winning with naupaka, and you can kind of easily spot the invasives now. This is a haulekoa, our nemesis, but look how small it is. So it's a good time to just take care of it now. And then this one is no good, but it's so small also. So just take that out. And you can see that this particular part of the shoreline, the aki is growing in. It's holding all the dirt. It's gonna protect this whole shoreline, and we're gonna just continue to go down and weed and plant other things than the aki and naupaka in the second phase. But you can already see the reverse after only 1 month of clearing and planting the invasives. Now at the same time, we're planting our coconut trees. So here we have our niu, and you wanna make like a donut like this. So as the water comes in, it just naturally goes down to the roots of the niu instead of going out. And so these are all coconuts that will be source of fresh water, food, shade, cultural practices. The niu is the heartbeat of Polynesian culture. So we planted all of these coconut trees along with the first batch. But you can see, I'm so happy. These are just really starting to thrive. And you can tell that this shoreline has a very bright future just based on the progress over the past 4 weeks. But really happy to see this part of the shoreline is doing really well. You can tell just by the trajectory now. Before it was 100% invasive. Now a big percentage is naupaka. We just gotta keep taking out guys like this invasive weed. Pull this out. Just keep malamaing a little bit every time. And this shoreline is well on the way to becoming completely self-sufficient without needing any type of irrigation or water. And this can be the model for shoreline management across the state. All right, we're on the beautiful shoreline of Waialua. You can see miles of white sandy beach, beautiful swimming, snorkeling, swimming, hanging out. And then we have the ocean, sandy shoreline, and then the start of the coastline. So here we're gonna show you the issues with erosion. You can see all this steep, eroded area. The soil is coming down, it's not holding. And you can tell there's just not the root system to make a healthy shoreline. This is definitely not looking like something that's sustainable, and you can tell that it's washing away. So this is not just an issue right here, but across the state in other island nations, erosion can be caused by a combination of factors, which is development that takes away the native shoreline plants. Sea level rise or climate change could contribute to that. But the biggest thing that we can do is just protect our existing coastline, and that can be done with native plants. So you can see here the reason why this is all eroding is there's a bunch of junk here. There's nutgrass, guinea grass, this junk flowerweed, this junk poki, and this guy right here, this crystally thing. So this whole area doesn't have anything healthy to hold it together. And even if there's vegetation, it doesn't mean it's a healthy shoreline. You gotta have the right mixture of plants that Mother Nature put here and intended to hold the shoreline. So the steps to restoring would be clearing out all of this invasive stuff, but at the same time you have to have the plants to put in to replace it and take the space instead. So the front line of that is going to be this amazing plant called the aki. It's like the offensive line of the shoreline, and it's this grass that can take 100% seawater. So it's on the shoreline. If the seawater hits it, it thrives. So it's an amazing shoreline plant, and this has got a very deep, nice root system that'll allow the sand to just keep percolating down and smashing in with the tide. So now you have sand dunes building up on top of the aki instead of the tide coming in and taking away the sand. So in restoration, you always want to protect the front line first, and this is the key plant is aki. You can also see that there's some akuli that we planted, and it's growing really, really nicely within the aki. So the akuli generally does good on the rocky shoreline, but it's also doing really well here, and underneath is all rock and coral when you get to the bottom layer, but it's really cool to see it thriving on the sandy shoreline along with on the rocky. So now this aki will just continue to go towards the ocean. So that's what makes it very unique also, is you can see these shoots coming out, but underneath you can also see these little nodes popping up. So these guys are going from here, and underneath this is connected to all of this, and it's going here, and here's one. So from here to here, now the sand has all of this to catch on. It'll go down, create a sand dune. Aki will come up, catch more sand. Now this can all become sand dune, and as the sand starts to build up and we add other medley of plants in here, this whole steep shoreline that's being eroded will become completely flat and have a big sand dune, and it'll build every time we have a nice tide come in or a swell. So instead of a tide or swell taking away huge bunches of sand, it could also bring in large amounts of sand that is a healthy part of the shoreline ecosystem. So here we have pohinahina. You can see these little babies that were planted, but they will grow to be these. So this is a big pohinahina. We just planted these small ones. So aki, akuli, pohinahina. This is one now that's crawling down. It's going to start going in, and the aki is trying to shoot out. And then you have your naupaka. So you can see as these plants start crawling over and protecting, and the aki comes up and the sand goes on, it's going to have a really incredible effect on the entire shoreline. So here you can see that the pohinahina, this guy is like thriving major. So you got the aki here, but look at this pohinahina, it's just crawling all the way down. And now you can see how it's going to just start crawling like that, and everything start all working together. So you need these vines, you need the ground cover, you need the bushes, and then we got this kamani tree, which could be 60 to 80 feet, just one tree providing shade for this whole area. So you want to space these out pretty good because they're going to have a wide canopy, but you can also plant them kind of dense and just see which ones compete and win, which is kind of how nature does it also. So I don't really mind planting kind of close to each other also. Now you can see here the erosion is really bad. See how it's like 90 degree or whatever degree that is, but it's really eroding at a quick pace. So we gotta beef up this whole area in order to protect here. So as we're walking the shoreline, we know where we need to add more plants, more resources, more effort. Now, if you come down here at the far end of the shoreline, we have the area that we first started to restore. And it's very inspiring because it happened just within like a year, since March of last year, so a little over a year. And you can see that the erosion has completely reversed, and now the land is actually starting to accrete and get bigger. So come with me and let's go look at a really healthy restored shoreline that has conquered erosion. This is the magic right here. All right, I'm gonna show you what looks like a dead little ball of weeds, but it's actually a really good sign that the shoreline's getting very healthy. So this is a bunch of aki that has got hit by the salt water. It turns brown, but then it'll perk back up, turn green, and start to root again. So this is actually the aki traveling and finding new paths. It's connected all the way over here to this one. So you can see this root system is all connected, and it's gonna start going all the way, catching more sand, creating more beach, holding the front line of the shoreline. So as you're walking on the shoreline, just be really careful and conscious of what you're stepping on, because these kind of fragile ecosystems, if you just let them thrive for a little bit, then they'll become very stable. And look at this amazing effect here is the erosion is 100% gone. This was eroding at the same rate as down the beach. It was a steep cliff right there. This is all new sand dune that has built up over the past 12 months. And it's all because of this healthy aki with a deep root system. And it's created like 100 feet by 3 feet of new sand that has filled in and made this whole thing have no slope. You can't even see any erosion here. If you go up and down the whole beach here, it's all eroded except for this area that has had just 1 year to grow in. We don't water this. The aki thrives on its own. We plant it when it's at a good root stage and it just thrives. And this is truly amazing and the solution for erosion. Can't use sandbags, can't use seawalls, you can't deny permits or ask for permits. It's gonna just have a negative effect down the line of the shoreline. The only way is to claim space back with the natural way. And if it takes a year or 2 or 5 or 10, doesn't really matter. That's the solution that can be put in place for other shorelines, is a nice, protective, native shoreline that allows for big, white, sandy beaches and for these native plants to thrive. So this is very exciting because this is our first area that we planted. And you can see the alpaca's 10 feet tall. This is where we get all of our seeds. There's a nice honeybee right here. And the butterflies come. And then within this, you can see there's one California grass there. But now the weeds are having a hard time to compete with the native plants. So we completely went from erosion to accretion, and from invasive to native, and the invasives will have a tough time to make a comeback because all these root systems have had a chance to take place. So now this second phase of the Naupaka starting to follow the Aki and say, oh, we've got space that we can move in now because there's this new dune. So this will continue to be able to come out. You can't just have the Naupaka. The Naupaka is great, but it's only one. You gotta have a medley of different root systems coming from below up tall. And that's the secret is the different plants and the different ways that they go about holding soil. You put them together, include the tides, and it's just a very natural ecosystem process. So now that we have these, we can propagate as many plants as we need just from our own backyard. And we can also have a seed bank for the whole rest of the coastline, the rest of the island. And this model can be replicated simply and quickly without much water or much financial cost. It's super reasonable versus trying to move highways or get homes out of the water after they fall in, or constantly be reactive and running away from the problem. So we can run straight into the issue of erosion and completely conquer it, like this area that has zero erosion. So we invite you to be part of the solution by coming and learning about native shoreline plants, how to propagate, plant, to find sites to malama, work with landowners. And if we all do it in a few years, we could have a complete reverse effect on all the beaches across Hawaii. Look at the Mauka side of the shoreline. So we looked at Makai side, which is the Aki and those other frontline shoreline plants. But a little bit behind, we're only 15 feet behind the Aki line. We can start to have a medley of really awesome plants. So this is my favorite, the Kamani, and it'll be a majestic, huge shoreline tree. Has the potential to grow 100 feet. I've seen massive ones like sequoia. And so this is a Kamani. And you can see all these native plants just living in harmony together. This is a ma'o. We saw it in the greenhouse. Look for the leaves. But the ma'o is super cool. It's a Hawaiian cotton. So on the edge of these, you can see it's really cool. It's just like cotton. Cool. It's very soft. So that one thrives on the shoreline. It likes the dry. It doesn't like to be too wet. You got some weeds growing like this. So to malama, you just come in and grab it at the root. You see how much space that weed is taking up. And so you just want to come in and clear space and then start planting behind it.
Talk about the water that the weeds take from too.
Yeah, so if this is competing with these weeds are taking up nutrients and water that the plant could use to thrive more. So if you weed around it and you get the roots, then that's always good. You can either pull it by hand or you can burn it. I like to burn them too, because after a few times getting burnt, they kind of give up, especially if you plant something over it.
I have a question.
Yes.
Talk about how you burn it.
When we burn it, I like to get a 5-gallon propane tank and one of those flame torchers. You click, get it going, and then you can just go in and you could torch this whole thing. But you really want to make sure you have a water hose at the exact same time. You cannot just be torching. You got to have the water hose full on, probably with somebody else is good. You're torching and doing it at the same time so no embers are flying anywhere. but that's a good way to get rid of weeds organically without using pesticides. But like this one, for example, it looks like a big one, but it's really just one. So even though it takes up a lot of space, it's just one weed. So we can just pull them. You gotta be a little gentle so that you don't rip the root on the way out, but then you can get the whole thing.
Adam, talk more about like fire and talk about like the winds are blowing today. It's not a good day to do it. Want to make sure that you don't have like dry brush right to whatever weeds are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to do it real early in the morning, 5:30, 6 o'clock. There's some dew already on the plants, and it makes everything just a lot safer. So you want to do it when there's a little dew, when there's not wind, and you have a water source. And if any of those don't click, it's a no-go. You can also use a mix of salt and vinegar in just a regular sprayer. And if you burn them and then salt and vinegar them and then pull them, they give up at some point.
Cool, I needed to know that for the weeds in my yard.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah, you got to be more persistent than them and more consistent. And over here, I got the tea leaves, pohinahina competing with some weeds. So see, this pohinahina here wants to thrive, but all this weeds is just getting in its way. So we gotta go, just get to the bottom of it. Make sure we don't pull out the good stuff. And then now if we pull this one weed out, this pohinahina will have a way better chance to thrive. So we'll pull that out, and now look how nice that looks. See? So this pohinahina is already rooting in the ground here, and this guy is just trying to bum his trip, so we'll get this out. And now it's all good. We got the alpacas here, pohinahina, tea leaf, ma'o. We have niu, coconuts. Every so often, we try and mix up. Wherever we just feel like there should be this plant, we just go for it. Ko's, kamanis. There's already a lot of milos, so we don't have to plant those here. The coconuts, the Hawaiian cotton. It makes for a gorgeous landscape. So I think also from a aesthetics point of view, having a native shoreline medley of plants is absolutely beautiful. And mahalo to Malama Hawaii program, HVCB. In the early stages, the whole team came out. They saw the existing shoreline, the beginning plantings, and added us to the Malama Hawaii program, where guests can come and guests can come to the Farmer's Guest and propagate, plant, weed, learn about shoreline. And so we invite you to come out, North Shore Stables. We have Monday through Friday volunteer hours, and you'll have a great time and restore the shoreline. Yeah, now we go drive to the akulikuli. All right, here we have a newly planted ko tree. All right, here we have this akia, but it's one that's really, really thriving. So this is what a akia looks like when it's grown out. It's starting to propagate itself, and you can see it's just this beautiful shrub that has a nice looking leaf and landscape. So akia is one that I really like planting, and it does well in bunches, and I like to plant a bunch of them together and kind of create a whole area of akia. But this is a really good example of just how one plant can start to really blossom, and this akia is doing really, really well. So this is the area behind where the erosion has completely solved. It's the first naupacas that we planted from seed. They're like 10 feet high. There's no way that this aina is gonna get washed away from tides, or it's just gonna catch more sand, create more sand dunes. And this is the first naupaka, but also the first pohina hina here. You can see how awesome this plant is. And so it just will crawl and find new space, and you can see all these nodes popping up. So the pohina hina is an amazing vine that crawls on the ground and helps to take over all this junk weeds. So this is the mama pohina hina. Want to pay our respect. And the mama naupaka, that's where we get a lot of our seed bank from now. So now we're on the rocky shoreline. So the plant palette will change a little bit. We're not going to focus on the aki because the sand is not an issue. But the rocky shoreline, well, in particular this one, you can see there's just glass everywhere. Like we've picked up glass for the past how many years, and just it's non-stop layer after layer of glass everywhere and rubbish. But you know, we just clean up one area really well, and then we got to replace it. So what are we going to replace with on a rocky shoreline? You remember that little akuli, that succulent plant that we had in the liner? Looks like sea asparagus. That is the aki of the rocky shoreline. So if you see a rocky shoreline that's covered with akuli, it's doing well. The microorganisms helps filter things into the water, helps the water purity and the overall reef and fish and limu. So those akulis, we take them from the liner to the bigger pots, and then we put them out here on the rocky shoreline. And you can see that it's starting to really thrive. This akuli right here is going into the rocks and starting to cover, and it's competing with this weed and this one. But you can see how it's starting to just spread, and now it's getting really thick and nice too. So look at this beautiful akuli, succulent, green, no water, no irrigation, thriving, starting to come out all over there, pockets here. You see this little guy sprouting out of the here like that. So eventually we want to have all of this covered thick like this, and you can like literally go run, sprint across these rock formations if you got the akuli. It's not even sharp because it's feet of this soft, cushiony, beautiful plant under your foot. So the akuli is a really good one for the rocky side, and you do this one by cuttings. So you take this, you cut it, put in the liners, have it root, up pot, bring them back over here, plant it in a new place, and the sea will just spread it naturally. So front line, sandy shoreline, aki, front line, rocky shoreline, akuli. Okay, look at this beautiful secret beach. But this is an indication of what was here before and also what is possible. So if you look here, there's like countless number of shells, clams, oysters. Like the whole thing is just shells and shells. So the wildlife and food here was definitely a place that could feed the entire area. And unfortunately now we don't have any of that. There is no shells, clams and oysters and all of these beautiful animals that used to thrive here because the river was clean, the ahupua'a was clean, so the bay was clean, and then all of these animals could thrive, and therefore the people could thrive. But without all of this food sustenance, now we start to rely on exports, non-fresh food, processed food, frozen food, everything. but it really is, if we take care of places like this that had an abundance of fresh food, then this would be everybody's first choice as far as a food source. So we need to rally around cleaning up these very vital ocean places that were the source of abundant food. And it starts with shoreline and then just going up the river. So our goal here is we're gonna take care of the shoreline, restore it, go up the river, make sure no sediment and runoffs coming in. And in a few years, this whole bay will be beautifully blue. The oysters will be back, the clams, and we invite everybody to be a part of it. There's a lot of work to be done, and it's super fun. Guarantee we're gonna be able to make it thrive again, because Mother Nature has this amazing ability to regenerate itself if you just reverse the damage and help it out a little bit. So I'm completely confident that what we're doing is gonna put the Mother Nature back on track to just do what it does naturally.